Welcome to Teaching Truth. Norman was a man full of boundless energy. Norman was a great mobilizer of people. And Norman was a man who had a vision, a wall-to-wall vision. Norman Hiley was my pastor in Whitley Bay Baptist Church in the late 80s. And Norman had a vision when he came to Whitley Bay to see the church grow and develop. His vision of wall-to-wall people, which he shared with us, was to see the church full on a Sunday morning and Sunday evening. And through his boundless energy, his mobilization of people, and his vision, that vision began to be realized as people became Christians, as people were baptized, as people joined the church, and as the church became busier and fuller on a Sunday. Norman Hiley was a man with a vision of wall-to-wall people. Nehemiah was also a man with a vision to see wall-to-wall people, as it were, rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. He was a man also of boundless energy, a man who mobilized people, and a man with a vision to see the walls of this great city rebuilt for the glory of God. And our reflections this week will follow that theme, wall-to-wall people. For literally hundreds of people were involved in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Everywhere you looked, people were involved in rebuilding. Nehemiah 3 documents for us not just who those people were, but where they rebuilt, and we'll discover that as we excavate into the earth of Nehemiah chapter 3 this week. For today, though, we want to look at the purpose of the rebuilding. What was the purpose of having, as it were, wall-to-wall people? Was it simply to put up a nice wall and to make it look nice and for everything to be lovely again? Well, the answer is absolutely not. Because the wall of Jerusalem, or the walls of Jerusalem, were not just ordinary walls. You see, Jerusalem was not like any other city. Jerusalem was not like and is not like Paris or London or Tokyo or New York. Jerusalem then, and indeed Jerusalem now, was and is God's city, Zion, city of our God. And therefore the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem were hugely significant, because this city was God's city, the city where the temple was. And therefore, to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, it wasn't just rebuilding the walls of any town or city or village, but actually it was rebuilding the walls of a place where God dwelt and which was hugely important to God. The purpose of rebuilding. Well, it wasn't just to produce and to make a nice wall again. Nehemiah, cupbearer to the king, visionary builder, the man full of boundless energy, and the man who was able to mobilize people, really only had one vision and one desire, and that was the glory of God. The glory of God. Nehemiah was not so much building for himself or to give the people something to do, but actually he was rebuilding to the glory of God. Nehemiah faced a great challenge to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. If you can just picture for a moment how much effort and how many people that must have taken. It wasn't just building a little stone dyke wall of 10 or 20 meters. This was a wall round a large city. And so Nehemiah faced a great challenge, but he had great faith in a great God, because he had a vision that God would help him. And Nehemiah would have accomplished very little had there not been dedication on the part of the people who helped him rebuild the wall. Nehemiah had a vision for wall-to-wall people, and the people caught Nehemiah's vision and worked with Nehemiah to build those walls. The walls of Jerusalem. The capital city of Jerusalem, Psalm 48 verse 2, beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth. See, Jerusalem was an important city, and therefore the purpose of rebuilding the walls was hugely important. If God loved Jerusalem so much, why were the walls in ruin, and why were the gates burned? Why was the holy city in such a state? Well, the reality is that Nehemiah came along. The rebuilding of the walls and the setting of the gates meant protection and security for the people. Jerusalem would have been surrounded by enemies in those days, and therefore the walls had to be rebuilt. Nehemiah arrived and challenged them, mobilized, set the vision before them to rebuild the city to the glory of God. The purpose of all rebuilding, the purpose of all ministry, the purpose of all we do, of any biblical and spiritual vision that we have, is not to glorify ourselves, not to make our churches look good, but is fundamentally and solely for the glory of God. Nehemiah was a man who had a wall-to-wall vision. Nehemiah had that vision to mobilize, to engage the people and to rebuild the walls. The purpose of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem was not that Nehemiah, the great leader, would look good, or that the people would be able to sit back and say, look what we've done. No. It was for the glory of God. The purpose of having wall-to-wall people. The purpose of having people in our churches, the purpose of all that we do, is not that we would be able to glorify ourselves, but point to the glory of God in all that is built in His name. The purpose of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem were for the glory of God. What is our purpose in serving God? May it be that all we do and all we build and all we help rebuild, like Nehemiah, is only for the glory of God.